Yuxi Wang here in conversation with us. Yuxi, welcome. We're just Yuxi has been a rock star graduate student here at University of Bocconi. She has an incredible story, incredibly inspiring, and I think might be relevant to a lot of the challenges and struggles you're facing out there. So this is really just a conversation. It's friendly, and we want to use this time to go behind the scenes. So much of academia, there are soft skills, things you don't learn in classrooms that are critical for your success. And so today with Yushi, we want to lift the lid behind that and learn just how it was, Yushi, that you've had this meteoric rise trajectory. And in particular, I want to talk about this one paper of yours that's gotten a ton of attention that you published while you were a graduate student. A systematic review. I'm just going to pull it up here, so if any of you guys want to look for it. Yushi published this just a couple of years ago. Systematic review on the spread of health-related misinformation in the Nice Journal of Social Science and Medicine. Cited already 269 times. It's a hit paper. It's classic. It's becoming a point of reference in the field. Again, incredibly impressive. We want to learn how you did it. Learn what mistakes and challenges you've had along the way. But before we do that, Yushi, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. Some personal and academic background of mine. I am originally from Beijing, from China. I went to the US for my bachelor's and my master, where I studied at NYU in economics and political science. And for my master, I went upstate to Colombia, and where I studied international affairs and economic development. And then I left New York, and I came to another fashion city town in Milan, where I started the PhD 4 years ago in public policy and health economics. In between, actually, I did spend 1 year back in China, where I did like a researcher position back in Beijing and Tsinghua University. And that is when I actually got into the health field, because we were working on health reforms in the Beijing city municipality government, where we basically draft a lot of reports and trying to suggest policy reforms for the health system in general, and drawing European experiences. And then at Bocconi, I started the PhD in health economics. It was a really great experience, where I actually was lucky to get involved in one of the European training networks, which is a consortium of various universities with health economics program, where we do training and courses, seminars all across Europe. So that was a great experience, where we also went to conferences, health economic conferences, where we were able to kind of disseminate our scientific results in conferences. It also helped us to kind of expedite some of the paper drafting and publication process. So at the moment, I'm working with David as a postdoc researcher. And I haven't really finished my dissertation defense yet, but I'm basically starting already with my postdoc.
So Yushi, that's really great. You've actually covered a lot, and I want to unpack that a bit, because some of the students I talk to, they're actually at the very beginning of this journey, and they might have some professional experience like you had in China, or where you had worked on health sector reform. But how did you decide that you wanted to do a PhD?
So there are a couple of reasons. I had no intention to do a PhD until I did a master, because so first of all, there was a little bit of family influence, because my parents were semi-PhD, they're doctors, so they're considered they had PhD, that have a little bit of
PhDs. I like that.
Yes,
like,
I mean, MD is still different
medical
from
doctors.
PhD.
Are not real PhDs.
There's more serious. That has a little bit of influence. but it was more of I also did have some experience in working in like startups and firms in the actual like industry world. And to me, what I enjoy a lot, and I think it's still quite a luxury nowadays, is doing a PhD and do your own research. You have so much autonomy in doing things that you really like, and you observe basically the world and find out things you want to investigate. And I think that's really for me is a great way of approaching life. But I think, yeah, it has some drawbacks, but I think I appreciate a lot of the freedom and autonomy that you have, and just the kind of the curiosity comes with doing PhD.
So I think you were a curious person before that, but yeah, it's a big time investment in
Yeah,
yourself, in
yeah,
your training, and
yeah,
one of the other things I like people to get a whole picture of who you are. Many people who go to study are studying in a place that's not where they were born. They've moved far away.
yeah.
Uh, for you coming from China, were there any? We have a lot of people who might go from Italy to the U.S. or from the U.S. to Europe, vice versa, or coming from India, many other countries. It's really a globalized world. Did you have did you feel any challenges um,
Okay.
coming from China as an international PhD student?
Yeah, I mean, besides, like there are a lot of cultural challenges, a lot of academic challenges. Actually, when I first went, my English was pretty kind of shaky. Even though I actually spent 1 year primary school in the US, that helped a bit. But still, growing up in Chinese is really rich language. So learning English along with a lot of the workload. That Chinese education system put on you was challenging. And therefore, when I went to the US, there was a lot of adaptation to make. And just the way that you approach academic environment was very different, because in China, they usually give you information, you receive it passively. Whereas in the US, there's always kind of they want to kind of trigger conversations, have a bit of a back and forth dialogue during courses or seminars, which for people coming from China was initially a shock. So yeah, that was initially a bit challenging, but I think I got used to it after spending so many years in the US, and yeah, and now in Italy, it's kind of yeah.
So look, I think a lot of people have the same challenge that they're doing not just a PhD, but they're doing it in a language that's not native and their own. So it's
Yeah,
a double challenge in getting into research. Is something I know for me
yeah,
as American, that is an advantage that sometimes we can take for granted. So that was a challenge, but also the culture challenge, and that's one I think characterizes not just East West, but also Europe and the U.S. I found some programs can be very hierarchical. I
yeah,
call them banking systems. Basically, the professor is going to come, open your mouth, deposit a bunch of information that you need to
yeah,
memorize and regurgitate later.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think the system is really hard because you might get a lot of tools and methods, but you're never really encouraged to be creative, and it's hard to come up with original ideas because you don't get any training on it. That training might benefit the academics out there who just need technicians and sets of hands, but for your career and producing a highly cited paper like you've done, you got to find a good idea. So let me ask you, how did you come up uh, with the topic you came up with? I mean, how did you come up with the idea for your systematic review paper?
So I'll start a bit broad because I think it's probably more relevant for most people, because my specific case was, I'll try to generalize a bit. So to me, I think social scientists, in the end, we are social observers. So you identify some social phenomenons and the actors that are involved in it, and you try to understand sort of the mechanism of why this is happening and how this is happening and through what channel things are evolving. And some topics are kind of easier to kind of operationalize. Some are harder. For instance, for my specific case, the PhD thesis, I focus on health disparity in general, the broader sense. So I look at how healthcare quality vary across geography, how different economic shock can have implications on the population differently in terms of mental health and different factors. And and besides, I guess, digging into the existing literature that you have, a lot of these ideas that I got from like this stream of my chapter come from, for example, dinner conversations, even just with friends and family, where they complain about just the differences of regional healthcare providers. And for example, this economic shock and the mental health is more like a hunch that you have.
Yeah.
Whereas for this misinformation paper, my inspiration was more from reading the news about all the anti-vax movement that were happening and all the political disinformation that was disseminating on the internet at that time, also now. I was just started to wonder why this is happening. And because this is such a complex phenomenon, so I wanted to understand what different disciplines are looking at this phenomenon and in what ways are they analyzing this. That's why I want to do a systematic review on this. And I guess this is a very spontaneous interest. I basically couldn't understand, couldn't fathom how many people are just susceptible to this kind of obviously bogus information online. So this is just the puzzle that I want to understand. I think this is a kind of an internal drive that I had in writing this systematic review. And I think this kind of puzzle are important for people to kind of really investigate the different topic that people are interested in.
So
Yeah.
there's a few ingredients here that I really like, and it may be a different way of thinking and approaching coming up with an idea than a lot of people have. I mean, you took ideas that you knew were problems that ordinary people were having in their lives, whether it's getting the right information about their health or economic aspects of mental health that came from dinner conversations. And you know, sometimes I think there are these purist academics out there that think, well, we're having this long conversation in science and only talking to scientists, but you were engaging with the struggles and hardships that ordinary people helped. And I think it's fair to say, Yushi, at least personally coming to know you, that I know you want to help people and make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, if you want to draw some parallel, it's like doing research is also a bit like, I don't know, creating a business plan for a startup or shooting a short film. So in the end, besides intrinsic value that you get from doing the research, also you need to think about who are the potential benefiting consumer or end product, like the audience. So I guess in this way, it's also you feel more driven so that you serve the people or the with the product that which in it's a paper. It's yeah, it's a bit more trivial, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm highlighting some of the comments, some of the real, I think, nuggets of what you're saying, that you feel driven to serve. And I think there's something that a lot of people, when they're doing a PhD, they feel like they get stuck, and they might run out of steam, or they get bogged down. And one of the things that you just said, I mean, you've clearly done something very well. You've married your big passion with a big debate and a big topic, and you did it in a very heart-centered way, in that it was about serving and helping others. And I really like that you said feel driven to serve. Do you think that I mean, well, can you talk a little bit about, have you felt those ups and downs in your research where you felt like, oh, this is never going to end, or you just felt stuck or beaten down by it? Have you ever gone through anything like that?
Yeah, I think we all do. Nobody, like everyone does. I don't think anyone who does research doesn't have this kind of issues, but I don't know. At the end, when I'm stuck, it's either, I mean, you're just really drained. And I think it's like people kind of deal with this kind of issue differently. What I do is I take a break and I would try to take a walk or talk to people who are outside of academia and just explain them um, what are the so what are you working on, and do they think it's an important issue to investigate? And these could be with family, with friends who are just working in completely different fields. And then I think oftentimes you feel that your work is valued in the end because they are interested. And that really helps when you have a sort of a mental breakdown. And you often have also the struggle of being ambitious in your research agenda, and then being pragmatic in actually carrying it out. And that was a lot of the time my struggle, as in I always want to understand like a social phenomenon fully, but in the end we have to accept the fact that you cannot possibly understand all the details. And it probably means that you will only make very small incremental contribution to the literature. You have to kind of accept that. That doesn't mean that you're not ambitious enough. It's just that it's very long process, and yeah, you just have to mentally prepare for some of the frustration that comes with.
Mm. So, guys, just those of you following along, if you like some of the things that Yushi's saying, just click like on it, because I know several of you watching have had some of these challenges, mental struggles, feeling demoralized. I really like what you said, Yushi, about how when you've chosen a topic, you've come from a place when you're serving others, that by talking to ordinary people, they can remind you like just how important what you're doing is, and it really recharges your battery and gives you energy to keep going through those hard times. I want to talk a little bit more about this because one of the things that I know a lot of people have a hardship with, I personally did. I remember I went from a small university in Texas, and I got up to Yale. And when I got to Yale, I felt like I didn't belong. Like I was a fish out of water, that I wasn't good enough, that they were going to find out about me and kick me out of the program even. Did you ever have, it's called impostor syndrome. It's incredibly common in grad school and hardly anybody talks about it. Did you ever have any of these feelings before?
Yeah, quite often in the beginning. And I actually do think that like a small dose of imposter syndrome is okay, because in the end you do work harder. Um, you kind of acknowledge some of the weakness that you might have, but this shouldn't prevent you from reaching out to help or being confident when you should be. Again, in this process, I guess your advisor or mentor should be there. They shouldn't be the one to bring you down, make you feel inferior. They should be, yeah, they should encourage you and confirm that your ability to perform the analysis is sufficient. So for me, how I deal with it somehow is that I just keep in mind that there's always more time to learn the things that you don't know. And then after I figure out, okay, I can always improve on that, even though I don't know as much maybe as I should do, then I'll usually feel much better. Yeah.
Okay. So that was one thing you also did really well. I know is that you were able. People have different supervisors who are of different quality. Some are really engaged. Some are very hands off, and sometimes their style might not meet yours. You've been really good about finding effective mentors, not just in the university you're at, but also internationally. Did you have a strategy to do that? How did you approach that? I know a lot of people want to know how can they get top people in the field to work with them and be interested in what they're doing and invest in them. Did you have a strategy for doing that? How did you learn how to do that?
I I don't know. So it's kind of a bi-directional selection in the end. So you maybe you have sometimes you have high expectation of some professor, but they turn out to be not maybe not as you imagine. So I mean, it would just be it will involve a lot of reaching out and seeing the professor who is really interested in what you are interested, not just giving you orders. So they give you constructive guidance and really put their heart into your learning and your growth, not just I don't know, pushing you to do things and help them personally. So um, and it's also important that the professor kind of has the guts to protect you if in case things go wrong. So all of these qualities, I think, are important to note when you have these kind of conversations with professors. And each of them are, in the end, very different. And of course, there are some trade-offs. So I guess for graduate students, this is not so much of my strategy, but just I feel like what could be a good way of approaching is to have a kind of a PhD committee where here in Bocconi we have three people. So one of them may be more senior, who maybe have less time, but have an excellent track record, and two that are less senior, so junior advisors, but with a bit more time and kind of follow you up regularly. And and I guess we all experience the fact that like people don't respond to email, they're so busy, and there's no way that you should take it personally or be frustrated about, because yeah, everyone
Yeah,
have their
yeah,
own
no,
thing to do, and it's
I know it's so
you
many.
know
This probably happened with you and I as well. You sent me an email, I didn't respond, and it just got buried somewhere in the
yeah, it
mess. And
happens to all professors, so
I
it's
know. For some
really
students, they can feel like,
something.
oh, he just doesn't care, or oh, it doesn't
No.
think this is important. But it's more likely it just got lost somewhere. We were being
Yeah.
absent-minded. That's really helpful, though. I love. That's a great strategy of actually thinking about. Sometimes I think we get this false idea our professors are perfect, but really they're good and less good at different things. And you manage to construct for yourself a team people to support you that each provided different inputs that helped drive you forward. I like that. I've got a question here, a couple questions coming from the group, um, and we've got a couple good ones from Maria. And she asks, "Do you think a good, efficient mentor is of great importance during your PhD and your career?"
Yes, of course. Basically, your motivation, I mean, yes, you have your own research to do daily, and I mean, it will be in the end a bit redundant, and a lot of uh, maybe the result doesn't come in, and then you don't know how to draft the paper. A lot of these processes, if you don't have a like a constructive uh, advice from your advisor, then you tend to be really left alone on your own device. And that is like I've had friend who had basically advisors who just avoid them all the time and only talk to them when they need to do the TA work, and that for them, like, it was a horrible experience. And yeah, I would have to say that that's kind of essential, no matter how good you are as a researcher.
Hmm. That's really helpful. Again, it makes me think there's this old adage that it takes a community to raise a child. In some ways, a PhD is
Yeah,
like having a child that you've got to
yeah,
nurture and carry along. And
yeah,
what you did is you got a lot of people invested in your success. So you didn't just hang it on one person who might have been or not have been present. You proactively went out there and got engagement from you got engagement from family and support, moral support when you're down, from friends as you talk about your topic, and from lots of different mentors along the way. And sometimes I think we make a mistake of painting this great person. It's like we see Yuxi publish these amazing papers as a grad student, she must have an IQ off the chart, which you probably do. But
No.
I think it's really helpful to know that there are actually, strategies and steps that you can take that if put these pieces in place, that anybody can do it. And Maria asked a question earlier. How many years did it take you to complete your PhD? That's a good question, because I know some people watching have time constraints. They want to do their PhD really fast, if possible.
Yes, so I don't know if you want to count the years that we took a bunch of courses. I mean, if you count directly from when you start the research after the courses, it took me, I think, 2.5.
2.5.
Well, I'm not done, but my thesis is complete. I just can't submit it. So until I basically finished my draft thesis, and most of my chapters are published, it took about 2.5 years. But we had 2 years of courses, so in the end, it will be 4.5, 4. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that's very fast, though, effectively. I mean, the core of the thesis is the research that you did. So it'd be fair to say 2.5 years. And
the research part, yeah.
The research part, 2.5 years, start to finish. Did you feel like, did you ever feel as you were, one of the things that people come through and struggle with is writing, that they feel like they just get stuck when they have to write, especially a long PhD. Did you ever get that feeling, or how did you deal with that?
Getting stuck with writing happens, I guess, to everyone, like also to like professional writers, and I guess people have different strategies to kind of deal with it. I usually, I mean, because it depends a bit where you're getting stuck on a paper. If it's just, I don't know, like for example, a section of introduction and the literature review, it's kind of a lot more difficult to get back on than just writing on the method and the discussion, because those are a lot more straightforward to write. I guess getting stuck on writing, what I do is I take my dog for a walk. I talk to people, and there really isn't like a straightforward way, because in the end, writing the introduction and the literature review part is not that creative, but it requires a bit of creativity in the end, because you are kind of filling up the literature gap. You want to write your own contribution. You need to make it flow perfectly well. So it's the longest piece of writing in an individual paper. And I guess people have different strategies to continue writing, and you feel like stuck, you just don't continue, because oftentimes when you come back to it, it flows a lot better. So you take a break. If you have a dog, take him for a walk or
Take a break. And that introduction absolutely is one of the hardest parts, right? I'm a big advocate. You write the methods and the results first, because that doesn't take Pulitzer Prize winning abilities. Actually, I like that you mentioned the dog. I know this is this is probably the real secret formula behind Yuxi's success.
Yeah. I mean, if you, because you need a bit of mental support.
With you?
Then yes, he's here. I don't know if you can see.
Oh yeah. Oh, there we go.
Go here. Yeah, it's you're not supposed to bring him in the office, but
okay. Nobody's watching. What's his name again?
Nanda.
Nanda. So this guys, those of you watching, you need to get your PhD dog. This is
he started. Yeah, I got him when I basically started the PhD. So that has been my mental health specialist for the entire time.
It's been
Yeah.
your mental health specialist. So get a
Yeah.
PhD puppy.
Yeah.
So it was a puppy. She was a puppy when you started.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
It's
guys.
3 months old.
PhD
Yeah.
puppy. This is really. I've got a couple more questions that are coming through, Yushi, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are benefiting from here. Here's one. I've got one from Nikki coming that I really like. She asks, "How do you ensure your research evidence remains valid, considering the length of time it takes to complete? Right? Some of these areas move so fast. I mean, how do you know that research is still going to help in the real world? I mean, sometimes it's a dinosaur process. Some people take years to produce research. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, how do
I
you
mean,
deal with
it
that?
kind of depends on the field, and the type of the type of the paper that you're writing. If it's, for example, if it's a systematic review, by the time you write it, you need to definitely check if there are any review that have been already published, and whether you think what you're doing and the time frame from your starting, from the time frame of what that other systematic review ended until when you think you'll finish, whether there are enough paper to include in that review. And not in other types of empirical research, it sometimes is hard to say, because people do encounter the fact that, okay, I did the research and then right before I submitted, there is something already been published, and that is sometimes inevitable, and it's just a bit of tough luck, but you can always at that time modify here and there and try to make very, very incremental contribution on top of what things has been published.
And you,
And
Yushi,
yeah,
that just happened to another person, Gabor, on my team. We were looking at some
yeah,
results on populism and health, and then got an alert. American Political Science Review just published the paper we were going to do on it. So always
yeah,
good to check if it's already been done. But one of the risks when you're working on such hot topics is somebody gets out
yeah,
first and you get
yeah,
scooped. But
yeah.
it's also a good sign you're on the right track, and it sounds like you had strategies that can still cope with that possibility. We have Eva asking a question. Do you have a strategy to publish? And I want to just I want to come to that, Eva, but I want to do
Oh, Eva.
one more question about your motivation and PhD. I've got another question coming. Say, if during your PhD you weren't or graduate training, you weren't getting the support you needed, where did you turn to for help?
Um, the support you needed, as in that your supervisors are not
Yeah, it could be your
giving
supervisor's
you.
not there, or um, yeah. I mean, I think you've been pretty good about building a team of people to support you. But
Yeah, I mean, I guess you will have to think, because maybe the ideal advisor you have in mind is not what you think, or what is not really supportive. And I'm sure in, I don't know which university you're in, but I'm sure in the entire faculty there will be maybe someone whose topic is not strictly related to what you want to do, but in the end will be a good mentor in helping you conduct your own research. So I think you can always, I'm sure there will always be a pool of people where you can reach out to. And also, I don't know about which university you're in, but there are also organizations like PhD student councils where students can always channel their complaint or just their comments or suggestions on the faculty to the faculty board. And in this way, I guess you can also just at least put, at least inform the faculty of this issue. Yeah.
that's really helpful. Let me talk to you. I want to roll up our sleeves and get a little bit into the publishing process yourself, because I also know some
Okay.
people who are following along here. they submit a paper for the first time and they run into all sorts of things that nobody ever told them about, so many boxes to tick, and then or
Mm.
they get the finally get the if the paper gets sent out for review, they get comments from reviewers that can be downright nasty. I mean, I've had some people just want to say, I give up, I quit. This is just I'm never gonna make it. So I want to talk to you about the publication process. Let me get to that, but I want to ask you about the nuts and bolts of the systematic review. When you're actually doing it, um, what do you think was what did you find was the most challenging about doing the systematic review? Was it just going through all the papers and picking what goes in, what goes out? Was it finding a conceptual framework to organize them? What did you find challenging?
Yeah, it was basically trying to fit all the information into a framework, because in the end, reading the paper and finding, like, kind of discussing what they found is pretty straightforward. Um, but because for this particular systematic review, all the papers are basically from very different disciplines, and even the findings is not like a meta analysis where you just kind of what are the outcomes, so you compare them. This one, the outcomes, all the papers' outcomes are completely different. Some don't even have one because the discipline doesn't look into that. So one of the challenges that I was facing is to find a proper sociological framework to understand how to put the different papers and disciplines and method and results into kind of a more structured way. Yeah, that was one of
Yeah,
the main
Yeah,
challenge.
I mean, I can imagine for you it was especially hard to find a conceptual framework because the papers you drew on in your review on misinformation in health had some public health, had some sociology, had some psychology, had some clinical aspects, and
Yeah,
so it wasn't that you could just go off a shelf and be like, well, there's this one
yeah,
size fits all framework.
yeah.
So how did you find that in the end?
In the end, I was looking more into the sociological literature, because you can always kind of categorize the phenomenon of misinformation spread by the actors at the micro level, and kind of the patterns, or in general the phenomenon, the spread on the macro level. And that was, and also at the individual level, some research look at how people susceptible different intervention can help. And then there are some modeling epidemiological paper where you look at the macro level, the spread. So I kind of organize in a way that I can at least separate some of the paper into different levels and explain them in that way.
So exactly. So one of the ways to do there are many ways to organize a framework, but one can be going from the levels, so individual to population, micro to
Yeah,
macro, and that worked well.
yeah.
That's really helpful. Let me ask you then, when it came time to submit the paper, how did you figure out where you wanted to submit it? I mean, there's so many journals. It's not always obvious where it should
Well,
go.
I guess the first time I asked you and the advisor, because in general, the advisors are a lot more experienced in what kind of content fit what journal, whereas I guess PhD students usually are less informed about this. Um, but and even when we're finalizing the journal, the first to submit, then you will still have to kind of reformat it to make it more suitable for the journal. And if you get rejection, then you have to reformat it to the new journal. So yeah, it takes quite a lot of back and forth and
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah, that
Um,
reformatting is not fun. Were you using a
no.
reference manager, by the way?
Yeah, I use Zotero
Sotero
and Mendeley,
and
both
Mendeley.
depending on exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And um, some people have this exceptional fortune that they submit the paper to the journal, it gets sent out for review. The reviewers say this is perfect, publish it as is. But that would be the dream if only that
Yeah.
could ever happen to us. What was your sometimes I think we fetishize papers. We see just this perfect typeset paper. It's like it came from the gods. It's so good, but we don't really see behind the scenes all that blood, sweat, and tears that went into the paper. Tell me about that
Yeah.
blood, sweat, and tears. Tell me about the what happened when you first submitted.
So for example, this misinformation paper, I think we first tried plus med and it didn't go through. And then I think that we go directly to social science and medicine. But then we realized that in order to submit it to social science and medicine, we needed more theory to support what we find in this. So that's the part where I kind of start to integrate this micro and population
Yeah.
level
So
and
so
make it.
tell me. Sorry to cut you off, but tell me about Plus Med. How did you feel after that, and what did you get from them when they rejected you?
I don't remember, was it desk rejection or yeah, in any case, it was a rejection. I know they did send it out to review, but they were saying something like it's not really within the journal's scope or well, no, I was mentally prepared for it. That was like because it's the first submission ever that I did. And if it goes through, I must have been just yeah, okay, won the lottery. So it was like I was really mentally prepared for that,
So
and I didn't feel anything
so
personal
that's good
about
because
that.
accept when
Yeah,
acceptance rates are two
yeah,
percent, really low, it's more likely than
yeah,
not it's going to be rejected. So you were mentally
yeah,
prepared, and that helped.
yeah, 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 yeah,
And what I like is what you did then is you took some of the feedback from that rejection and you made it
yeah,
positive, and it
yeah,
helped you to improve the next version that you then
yeah,
sent to social science
yeah,
and medicine.
yeah, absolutely.
And then
And
when those comments came back from social science and medicine, I mean, how do you deal with? Sometimes you get these comments that feel like a personal attack. I mean, how do you deal with some reviewers? I think it's because you can't see them. They feel like they've got carte blanche to
yeah,
go ad
a
hominem.
lot of
How did
yeah,
you
I
deal with
mean,
nasty comments?
well, you have to deal with them one way or another. You can't just avoid them, first of all. And a lot of the nasty comments, well, I didn't really get nasty comment, were just a bit territorial, as in it was clear that they were suggesting things that are kind of superfluous or not necessary to include in the literature, saying that this is still relevant for you, even though for us, I think it's not strictly related. So there isn't, I mean, in the end, we have kind of addressed some of the comments that this reviewer have suggested, but not fully, and explaining to the editor clearly why we did not do that, and hoping that the editor will make a sound judgment on what we have responded to the reviewer. Yeah.
So okay, so you engaged with those comments of the reviewers that you could, and some of those comments you didn't really say, okay, well this is really dumb or get in a fight with the reviewer. You just kind of pinged it back over to the editor to
Yeah.
to kind of help
Yeah.
resolve that dispute. So
Yeah, I think I remember we wrote a letter to the editor for the last round of review. So yeah, to
yeah,
really
so
explain.
that's also an opportunity in responding to those reviewers. You can write a letter to the editor because they're very busy people too. And just at
Yeah,
a glance, they could see how you took on the comments, how some of them you might not have been able to take on, and they were able to resolve it. So
yeah, and in the end, actually, when after we wrote the letter and the editor went through the paper, we didn't go through another round, and he just said accept as it is after that round. Yeah,
So yeah, that's an advantage of a very thorough, convincing response to reviewers. The goal is you want to try to convince the editor that they don't need to send out the paper again.
yeah,
Doesn't always happen, but in
no,
your case, I
Yeah.
remember you wrote an extremely detailed letter. In fact, that the letter was almost as long as the paper itself, and responding. Um, Let me ask you then: when this paper came out, how did it how did it affect your life? And how did you feel when it got published? What was that like?
No, it's the first peer review publication, so I was sending it to all the close friends and family that I know because yeah, it's still something to be proud of. And I started to use Twitter because of that, basically, just to because I think you and Martin were also tweeting it, so I felt compelled to also use Twitter to also retweet it a little bit. And then yeah, I realized I I'm getting a lot more emails from different journals asking to be reviewers after being like a correspondent or author of this publication. And yeah, there are many changes. Some invite you to conferences, and yeah, it
Yeah,
was quite a change.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite exciting because what happens is when you start publishing a paper, it's not the end of the story, but in some ways, it was the end of the beginning for you because people were suddenly willing. They wanted you to come speak at conferences. They started to see, well, Yushi's an expert on this. We want you to review papers. They start you. It was almost you didn't even have the PhD yet, but you were being
Yeah, yeah.
recognized as an expert, an authority in the field. Is that fair to say?
No, sorry, but definitely they acknowledge your existence much more than before. Yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, one of the things for me, the journey as a grad student is I felt very small. And I remember publishing my first paper, I felt maybe just a little bit less small than I had
yeah, yeah,
before
yeah,
in the
yeah,
grand world of research.
yeah.
Uh, that's really amazing. I just want to kind of ping back and see if people have more questions for you while we've got you. And I just want to have a broad question of, you know, you've accomplished these great things, and you stayed motivated through it all. And where are you looking to go next?
Uh, I haven't really thought it through yet, but definitely I will be starting to look for tenure positions for the next year. But I just want to also just be able to finish well what I have on my hand now as a postdoc and researcher here, and hopefully the next step will come along smoothly. But of course, I have to actually look for them. Not yeah,
Okay,
but yeah.
so you're focusing on the immediate challenge of getting papers out as a postdoc.
Yeah, a bit also to kind of consolidate a bit of my profile because one thing that I have been a bit like non-strategic about was my dissertation and how even though it's all on health and health disparity and even the misinformation, it wasn't as kind of is not as streamlined as I would expect it. So in the end, I spent a lot of time trying to connect them with my first chapter. So that would be something that I think before I start to apply for tenure positions, I would try to make sure that my profile is consistent and all the papers still have quite relevant, like it has a relevance across each other.
That's really a good point and something important. Actually, I just want to take a second on that because sometimes PhD students come in and they don't have freedom to just take on whatever topic that they want. They might have funding that binds them to a certain topic. And I know that you had some support from your PhD that had some expectations with it, and you were still able to do some of the things you were really passionate about, and you were able to do both. Um, how did you balance that? How were you able to find time to do some of the things you were passionate about and still meet some of the expectations that came with the funding for your PhD?
I guess my PhD funding in the end it was it was very well designed, and you have quite a good network of student and professor who support you. And in the end, I did benefit a lot from it. And I was able to do something that I read, even though it maybe it's not, I wasn't as passionate about it as this the misinformation information disorder. I really enjoyed the process, and I was able to kind of I think the importance in that sense is the environment, the network, and the constant support of my advisor. And the thing is, once you dig into a topic, the more you do it, in the end, the more you like it. So there, for me, it wasn't at all kind of. I didn't feel sort of an internal conflict in that process. Yeah.
So going deeper into the topic, you actually found, in some ways, I think that's right. When you just scratch the surface, you don't really get into the joy and satisfaction of really digging into a tough question or set of problems in a field. You should, yeah, I do think too. You're capturing where you're going now. One of the challenges I know some graduate students face as they transition from postdoc to trying to get to where they're going to build their own team one day, which is creating a coherence to your body of work and finding a direction that you're going to be known for. And it can be really hard when you're passionate about so many things to know, okay, well, I'm going to have to go on the job market. I'm going to have a job market paper and interview and present myself in this neat, tidy biography. But realistically, I mean, Yuxi, myself, none of us is a neat, tidy biography. How are you approaching trying to create that coherence and that coherent narrative that you then have to present on the job market?
Um, I guess everything you write, because basically, if I focus on health disparity in general, you go back to inequality, and if you go back then, you go to Aristotle and all the philosophy of thought that comes with it. So in the end, I think it would be. I mean, it's basically my first chapter is based on philosophical speculation of health disparity from a historical perspective, and I think and that's a great mental exercise. And in the end, after that, I thought that actually all my research are connected somehow, and actually to begin beginning of the PhD, I also wanted to do political science, and so authoritarian regime and censorship, media censorship. But in the end, I did not pursue that because I think that would be too far off from the rest of the thing that I do. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, you kind of have to.
I think that's a hard thing to do. I mean, I know because you're a very curious person, and I think a lot of the people going down a graduate path are very curious. You sometimes feel like a kid in a candy store, like, wow, that topic's really exciting. Oh, I have this good idea. I
Yeah,
have that good idea.
yeah,
And you're good in a way. I always say the phrase "kill your darlings." That you can't take on all of these. It sounds like you were able to realize that okay, this is a really cool idea you had, but it's just not so feasible. Or how did you make that judgment call, Yushi, that this was just not going to be the path that you wanted to go down?
I guess I keep that in mind because I know that at a certain point when we're more established, you can always do what you want to do, and that is for the future. But at the moment, uh, I think we need to focus on things that have a significant contribution to literature, not just maybe like I don't know, just something you're marginally interested and then pursuing that with like compromising your kind of core work. So I think I had to keep that in mind and be a bit more pragmatic about the process. Because you will always be able to write a new grant about the thing that you were interested in once you are in a better position than a PhD or a postdoc.
Okay, so it sounds
Mhm.
like you didn't throw it away, didn't exactly
No,
kill your darling, but you just
no,
tucked it on a shelf, knowing
yeah,
that look, if you stay focused right now, you're going to free up the space. You're going to get the
Yeah.
resources so that you can do it later.
Yeah.
That's really helpful advice. I just want to turn back to those of us following along. If you have, and there's a little bit of lag, so they won't get it right away. Um, Feed in some questions with us as we wrap up here with Yuxi. Yuxi, this has been tremendously helpful. I want to ask you just a final kind of question before we break. Uh, if you could have a conversation with yourself, the Yuxi of about 3-4 years ago, when you were just starting the PhD, what would you want to tell that younger version of yourself based on what you know now?
I guess it kind of still goes back to what we were saying. I think ideally I would have kind of create like a master kind of plan to ensure that all of my chapters or PhD thesis are consistent throughout. There is a clearer research trajectory, and because I was more thinking of the thesis in terms of papers, but not in terms of chapters.
Mm,
Um, and that in the end, it was good because in the end they were mostly published. But I mean, it was the difficult part. The more difficult part than writing the paper were to kind of finding the common thread
mm,
and creating that kind of overarching framework that
yeah,
include all of them, which was in the end maybe not strictly necessary if I had a master plan in the
yeah.
beginning of the PhD.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So that can be double edged. That can be good and bad because you
Yeah.
wrote your PhD kind of by publications that enable you to publish fast and get lots of
Yeah.
feedback and people invested in you. But then afterwards, you had to go stitch it together and find some thread
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
linked it all. I think it's
Yeah.
challenging either way. I would tend to tend to agree with your
Yeah. No, I
approach.
actually
But
really enjoy the process of connecting them. That was the just yeah, it was a philosophical exploration, but it was not strictly necessary considering all the brain cells that I killed writing that chapter. Yeah.
Hang on a second. I just need to clarify. Somebody thinks I use killing your dog as an example. Kill your
Oh,
darlings. I think my southern
darn.
drawl is coming out. Nobody would ever want to lay a hand on Nanda. It's like the secret power that you have to stay motivated. I mean, I've learned I need to get a
Yes.
PhD dog snuck into the university because nobody
Yeah, it's not
can,
allowed yet.
can know. Yushi, look, a big thank you. I've learned a lot from
Mm.
you, and I know your insights and just going behind the scenes with you is helpful to so many of those watching from home, our grad students who struggle with all these things at different points on their graduate and academic journey. So, big thanks for joining us today. We're going to
Thank
continue
you.
our In Conversation series on Fast Track Grad. And guys, Yushi's going to be around. Send questions in the comments. Link up with her. I may be speaking for you, Yushi, but I know you're just such a good person. You're so passionate. And you also share that kind of heart centered approach that we have of wanting to help people accelerate their careers. So that's it for today, and look forward to seeing you in our next Facebook Live session.